I work in a company that with our mantra and our brand,
values family and
keeping insurance human. Well, it is human to need to take time off. It is human to need to be there for your family. And that is the environment and the culture we have. That's not lip service.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to LED, Leadership with Ed. I'm Ed McGill, co-founder and partner of McGill Jungie Wealth Management, as well as the host of LED, as I continue my really 35-year journey of just understanding leadership, how to make people better, inspire others, etc. And I want to thank everyone that's joined us for this inaugural first year of LED. It's been great, and hopefully everyone continues to find us on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. And if you find benefit from the different topics, make sure you like, subscribe, as well as pass on the information to others as we continue to have an impact across the country. And remember, you can catch episodes. They drop every other Wednesday morning, bright and early. Kim gets up and drops them for us. And since we're in October, we are continuing this Women-Owned Business Month. And we got a little different twist here today because we have on Beth Nigut, who is an executive vice president at EMC Insurance Companies, one of the top 50 largest property casualty companies in the country. And so you may be thinking, that's not a business owner. Yet I would argue that they are when you're in corporate America. Beth runs a very large component of the company. It's a business unit within a large organization. And we're going to talk about leadership, not only of running a specific unit, but how do you mesh with the other executive leaders in the team in there. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Beth is in Des Moines, really known as one of the top leaders, I would say not only in Central Iowa, but across the country. She's beloved, and we hear nothing but great things about her leadership skills and how she develops and mentors others. So this is just going to be tremendous to have her on here. Beth, welcome to LED, your first time on Leadership with Ed. So welcome.
Ed, thank you very much. I'm humbled by your introduction. Hope I can live up to it. And just very, very excited for our conversation. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, of course. And I would say we're humbled because, again, that is a true statement. You know, we've seen you win HR Executive of the Year. I've seen you in action at other places. I've seen you lead EMC through COVID and everything else. And then because we're connected in Des Moines, I just hear people talk about you and your leadership skills. So I would say the feeling's mutual. But I am curious, you know, you go to Simpson College, which is a smaller liberal arts school outside of Des Moines. Then you go to Drake Law School. You start in private practice. And then eventually you make this leap into corporate America. Tell us just about that career journey and who is helping maybe provide some advice, leadership. Who was your early mentors, you know, on this journey that you've been on?
Well, so happy to share a little bit of the background. And, you know, it's interesting in terms of like landing in insurance. A lot of times we have the conversation when we're visiting with new team members or even those of us, I've been here now at EMC for about 15 years. But nobody typically aspires to say, you know what, I'm going to work in insurance. That is my
It's
dream,
not a destination,
right?
usually.
Yep. It's not like when you're a little kid, you think, I'm going to grow up and work in the insurance industry. And yet it's an amazing industry. It's a cornerstone, I think, of any community, and just could not be more proud to be a part of this EMC organization and what we stand for. But my journey was a little bit interesting because, quite honestly, when I was younger, I wanted to be a trial attorney. And so
Did you really? So you were argumentative early on in the family? And
you nailed it. You nailed it. In fact, that is exactly why my parents said I should be a trial attorney, because I was a bit of an argumentative, spirited kind of child.
I like that. Spirited, everyone. Spirited. Good term for your kids.
So ended up getting into private practice, and I actually did do trial work for about the first 14 years of my career. Now, interestingly, EMC was one of my biggest clients. So we did insurance defense work. And so a lot of work for EMC, doing employment law, different types of insurance coverage analysis. And so EMC was a big part of my upbringing in terms of the trial work. And in fact, I first tried my first cases that I tried were for EMC policyholders. And so I got to know EMC, and I will say, being in private practice, we did work for a lot of different insurance companies. I loved working with EMC because of the people that were here at EMC, because of the way they worked up their files. By the time the file got to litigation, not everybody was super angry. We could still have conversations. And that was in part because of how EMC treated the policyholders, treated the plaintiff's attorneys. So I did private practice for about the first almost 14 years. But then, so when you talk about a mentor, there were others who, and I loved doing trial work. It was a little bit of a rush in terms of being able to go to court and advocate for my clients. But it was there was an opportunity, and in fact, in talking with other attorneys in terms of really exploring some passions and things that are near and dear to my heart. One of it is also public education, and so. My dad was a school teacher. In fact, he taught at East High School, which is where I went to high school, and he taught there for over 40 years. My sister is a teacher, so public education is a passion, and I believe deeply in public education. And I had the opportunity then to go from private practice to be general counsel at Des Moines Public Schools. And so I took that leap. And incredibly hard job, as you might imagine. You're dealing with a lot of different influences, and of course, education is something very personal to everybody, because you either got kids that are in a school system.
Yeah.
As a taxpayer, are the public schools being the good fiscal stewards? With the tax dollars in order to provide that public education. And you've got your teachers folks who are teaching. I mean, it's a calling. And I have got such deep respect for those who are in education. So I did take that opportunity and was at Des Moines Public Schools for close to 4 years as their general counsel. You're working with administrators, with teachers, with the board. And while I was at Des Moines Public Schools, I was also a policyholder of EMC. So
there you go.
Still had that connection with EMC. And so EMC would manage and handle a lot of our claims. And so still having that ongoing connection with folks in the claims area, with others at EMC, and still there was still that connection with EMC. So I got a call from the former head of HR at EMC when I was at Des Moines Public Schools, and she told me she was leaving to take on a different role. And my first reaction was, oh my goodness, what are they going to do without you? And she said, well, actually, Beth, that's why I'm calling you. Would you be interested?
Well, you're my successor.
Yes. And so my first reaction was, are you crazy? I've seen that, from an HR perspective, that can be an incredibly challenging area. And I've seen how, I had worked with her when I was in private practice and helping provide some employment guidance and counsel. And her response was, Beth, you're working in public education right now. Don't tell me that that's not, a challenging area as well. Which I'm like, well, true. And so again, reflecting on being able to have an opportunity to be a part of this organization, this team that had been a consistent through line with my career at that point in time. So I thought, well, okay, I'm going to put my name in the hat. I knew employment law. I had not led an HR team, but even with Des Moines Public Schools, as legal counsel, I worked very closely.
Yeah, you're heavily involved in that area. Yep.
Yes. So working hand in glove with HR, put my name in the hat, had several rounds of interviews, and I am forever grateful that they took a chance on me. And they hired me to lead HR. And so I had the opportunity to join the team that I had admired and respected and trusted, from that outsider perspective, and then coming inside. And that was 15 years ago. And I can tell you the best decision I made from my career, 100%.
See, and that's awesome. And what for some that may not realize this, so right now when you talk about insurance companies, there could be some people rolling their eyes. You hear some of the horror stories. You obviously have the tragedy with the healthcare executive CEO up in Minnesota. But one of the things that, because we see EMC here in Des Moines, that some people may not realize is that's Employers Mutual Corporation or company, which it was. Mutual means that EMC is owned by the policyholders. So there are no shareholders. So you effectively eliminate a potential conflict of what's in the best interest of the policyholders versus the shareholders then too. So you have more of this family atmosphere, this more development of growth within there. Your leadership team's been very intriguing to me. You seem very cohesive on LinkedIn. The post, there's the four of you together, Scott Jean, who's the CEO, Todd Strother, Chief Legal Counsel, and then Ann Collins, the CFO. Are you guys as close as it seems? And I'd ask you about Scott Jean, because you said, Ed, you need to have Scott on the leadership podcast, because Scott grew up as an actuary by trade, went to Iowa State, on that. So that isn't the normal, maybe picture this larger than life, gregarious type of CEO that sometimes people think is what you need. But tell us a little bit about just the whole leadership team, starting with Scott and what he brings to the table. Does he bring anything to the table? Does Scott Jean bring something to the table? I'm good friends with Scott, by the way. So now
I say that, right?
Yes, exactly.
Well, so that is what is so fun. And, you spend a lot of time, and you know this. We all know this. You spend so much time with the people that you work with. And
Correct.
So when you work with phenomenal people, phenomenal human beings, it makes the job so much better. And I am so fortunate to be on a team with phenomenal human beings. And when I tell you that, we have our brand of keeping insurance human, EMC's why is we exist to improve lives. That is not lip service. That is not lip service. It is something that we not only talk about, but we aspire to act on every day. And so with Scott taking over as CEO, which is, yes, as an actuary who's been at EMC for 30 plus years, we joke around it, and Scott, I think, said he has had to have 2 W-2s in his life, from Hardee's and EMC.
Because he started right out of college. I remember
right
that.
out of college. In fact, it's a great recruiting tool because he was an intern. So we're able to say, oh my gosh, look at what can happen if you are an intern at EMC. The sky's the limit. And it's true, because we do invest. We invest in our team members. We invest in our communities. And we are here for our policyholders. And that is the beauty of being a mutual. And since I've been here at EMC, we've taken actions that I believe have allowed us to really be true to our roots as
Real quick,
mutual.
when you said you've taken actions, does Scott allow you to run your unit the way you want? Tell me a little bit about the
Sure. Yeah.
either hand on the shoulder versus autonomy versus what you're able to do, as well as, Todd and Ann as well.
Absolutely. And so when we think about that, it is, so one of my phrases, and from a standpoint of leadership style, it's both and. Because I find that the either or is not always conducive. And to draw those bright lines is a bit of a fallacy. And from a standpoint of critical thinking, and how do you really bring two things together? So there absolutely is autonomy and trust and respect, that the areas that I support, and that still includes human resources. It also includes IT. It includes our marketing, communications, our customer experience, and then we're going through a sales modernization, and it includes the strategy portion of managing our sales, distribution, and agency management team. I also have strategy and innovation, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And then it's called digital product management, business process, and program management. So some really diverse teams, very
About
diverse,
8 different silos
right?
running there.
But it is very diverse teams, and yet we all come together. So the officers that are leading each of these distinct business enabling areas will come together because the perspective that Scott has created is a one EMC. So it is being autonomous in terms of leading the teams, interacting with those leaders, having leadership development opportunities, understanding some of the technical nuances that are going on, and how are we showing up to lead in a way that is one EMC, that we are always thinking about how does this impact the entire organization? Because the more we break down our silos and the more we think about less of I'm representing HR or I'm representing IT or I'm representing the field and more about what does this mean for the company as a whole? We are able to pause and incorporate diverse perspectives and different ideas and different thoughts, challenge each other. And that's the team that Scott has created. So we don't have a typical kind of COO, but instead, Ann Collins, she's our CFO, but she also has the underwriting component that comes up through her.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so Todd Strother, who's our chief legal officer, he has claims, coming up through his organization. So collectively, we each of us have an operations component and the enabling teams that require us to think differently. And I would say more holistically. So every Monday morning, our executive leadership team meets, for a couple hours, and our discussions are both strategic and execution, but it's thinking about what do we need to be doing from a standpoint of macro EMC and how are each of our areas impacting the whole? And that is with Scott's direction and leadership.
See, and that's awesome. I hope people wrote down some things there too, because one of the things that is hard to be is both strategic and operational. Because, you think of the book Rocket Fuel, they talk about the integrator versus the visionary. And what Beth just said there, each unit has to have some visionary, the strategic, where are we going, how are we leading this, but then the operation. And then two other things you said, which is probably why your company is so well regarded in Des Moines and across the country. She said one EMC. So there's one message that's going across the entire, I think it's up to like 2,300 employees.
Yeah, right about 2,200, little bit under 2,200.
Yeah, across the country. And then you think of did you say make insurance human? Is that
keeping insurance human?
Keep it insurance human. So you have this vision that everyone can act on, and all the decisions then are being made for that. One other thing that I read in one of the articles when I was doing just research, I found very intriguing, and I'll tell you how Ross Junge, who you know well and went to Simpson with, and so did your husband, is connecting what we would call these great workers, the day-to-day workers that also, though, get access to the executive leadership team. And I think some of it started during COVID, but tell us what you're doing to allow everyone to see and understand the mission of EMC from the leadership team.
Thank you for picking up on that. Again, that is something.
I'm very astute, man. I am curious and a reader.
You are astute. This is excellent. Thank you. I mean, you're teeing up such rich conversation. So thank you. And you can tell that hopefully it's coming through how passionate I am and how Scott has instilled that passion in all of us. Because again, so a couple of years ago, we began to, and it started before COVID in terms of our why of improving lives. And then, a few years ago, we did go through our brand amplification, which was not a total shift, but then how do we amplify on all the good and then continue to build? And that led us to keeping insurance human. But a cornerstone of that, predating that was this improving lives. So then when you think about we're going through the pandemic and everyone's at home. and how are we staying connected? And thank goodness, for technology, but it was, and you're online all the time, but then it's being intentional. And I will say intentionality, authenticity, and vulnerability are key pieces of servant leadership that is core to our keeping insurance human and our why of improving lives, which is why I'm proud to be part of the insurance industry for that aspect. But then it has to start with how we interact with our teams. It has to start with the relationships within the virtual or existing walls of any organization. How do we make sure we're accessible, right? I mean, so from a standpoint, a brand new team member to EMC, we will have meet and greets where every new team member, we get on a call, and before the pandemic, it was in person and in Des Moines, but we've got offices across the U.S. And so we can still utilize our capabilities, technology capabilities. And so if we've got a new team member in, Boise, Idaho, or a new team member in Atlanta, Georgia, or out on the East Coast, everybody gets on a call on a consistent basis, and we meet all of our new team members. And it's our executive leadership team, it's our senior leadership team, that we want our team members to know we are here for you. And it's not a one and done. So we have people who are reaching out to Scott routinely. Same with me. I do coffee chats. Throughout the pandemic, every Monday morning, I did a meeting with all the teams and the team members that I support. Just so at that point in time, it was to reduce anxiety and let folks know we're here for you. We're going to communicate. We're going to get through this. We're better together. And it's consistent, post-pandemic. So even though, a lot of us, some of us are back in the office and we see each other in person, but then it's making sure whether you're working in the office, whether you're working remote, whether it's hybrid, how do we make sure we're intentional about setting up those opportunities to touch base?
Intentional, yep.
Yeah.
To have those opportunities.
Have the relationship. It's a relationship business. I mean, we rely on our independent agents to place our products and sell our products. If we're going to have a relationship business where that's what we are from a marketing perspective, and we want to be responsive experts to our independent agents and our policyholders, we got to start with that internally. And so we have to have those relationships internally.
See, and that's awesome. And I hope what everyone wrote down, because I thought this was just, pure gold, is she said you need to be intentional. So setting up specific time frames to have these, you got to be authentic. So especially during COVID or even now, there's some issues with property and casualty, just with different, events that are happening, to say, here's where we are, here's what's going on, here's where we see the positives, here's where there's going to be some hurdles. And then they sense then that vulnerability to say, okay, I can actually ask and talk. And one thing Ross, my business partner, brought Beth from corporate America, because he had come from Aviva, is skip meetings to our teams. And it was the ability for anyone to skip their direct report to actually meet with Ross or myself and now Gina. And it wasn't a skip to complain. It was just, Ed, where do you see my future? What am I doing well? What do I need help on? What would you do differently if I was me? And so it was really interesting to have these 22-year-old kids that maybe had been there 6 months. They signed up for a skip meeting. And it was just so fun just to learn more, about their story. Now we're a team of 25, not 2,200, so we can have individual skip meetings. But whether it's a skip meeting, whether it's the coffee chats, whether it's, in a bigger setting, it sounds like all four of the executive vice presidents are all accessible to not only their teams, but to others. Would that be a correct statement?
100%. And so interestingly, when you do those skip level meetings, my guess is that you are probably getting every bit as much value out of meeting with those that you don't necessarily directly supervise or report as they are from having access to you.
I would agree. And that's where you just learn more about them. And it gets back to when people know, you care and you actually know their name, you know, whether, spouse, no spouse, what they're going through in different pieces. And speaking of spouses,
Yes.
your husband has one of the greatest names ever, Rush Nigut, former Simpson football player with Ross. I'm not sure either one of them had much of a NFL chance or a career, but they enjoyed their time there. Rush is also a practicing attorney. And you used the word Rush early in the segment here, and I thought, oh, that was kind of a little play on words on that. That was good. Tell me about what it was like, because you have two boys that were very successful, growing up playing sports, and Rush was able to coach him. Now he's in private practice, so I think he had a little more control sometimes of calendar, but I've always been impressed by couples that both are high level professionals, with both of you, obviously are. Your demands with travel, and if you're doing, with the reps, you're going to have some travel, you're going to have some, meetings that you got to go out, you're having conventions and different things. How did you balance being a mom, being a wife, being there for corporate when Scott and team said, hey, we really need you here? How challenging was that, and how did you navigate that, Beth?
It has definitely gotten easier, but you're right.
They're out of the house now, the boys.
We are empty nesters, and so it's, Rush, myself, our dog Rocky, miniature Australian Shepherd who keeps us busy, and it's awesome. But it's important to have that communication, and certainly Rush and I were very fortunate that we have each other. And whether it's balance or more of a yin and yang, depending on what's going on with each
What's
other's
needed,
lives.
yep.
Yes, it's I would say a little bit more the safety net. And what I absolutely have come to appreciate, and I just have so much gratitude for, is so sports, certainly a very, very big part of the upbringing. And you can probably see in the pictures behind me some of the baseball photographs back there. I'm very proud that both of our boys we had two Division I baseball players. And baseball has been incredibly central to the upbringing, to even just our family dynamic. But I will also say some incredible life lessons, and even from a leadership perspective. And Rush and being in private practice, it did give him some flexibility. He coached both of our boys and their teams, and they have come to have a really, really strong appreciation for that. In fact, just over the weekend now, my youngest son is doing some coaching as he's in his master's program. And he said to Rush on Sunday, he's like, oh my goodness, he's like, how did you do this for so long?
This is hard. Parents are all over me. This kid can't hit the curveball.
It's so very interesting. But both, my oldest son is, he's now a sport performance consultant. And so working with other athletes in terms of that mental mindset.
Mental side, which is so huge.
So huge. And my youngest son is in a master's program for counseling to pursue kind of that similar passion. But I would say that it's been fascinating because Rush and I have learned from our kids as well in terms of some of these lessons, in terms of what mental resilience, what mental toughness, and then how do you translate that even into our work, into what we're doing. But it is definitely the communication and being there for each other. And where I will go back to gratitude for where I work in a company that when we, again, with our mantra and our brand,
values family and
keeping insurance human, well, it is human to need to take time off. It is human to need to be there for your family. And I just had a team member say to me a couple weeks ago about another officer in our organization and how much she appreciated her direct people leader because she was going through some challenging aspects. And her people leader, who's one of a tremendous officer that we have here, said, this is work, and then there's your personal life, and what you've got going on matters. So we got you. You go be where you need to be. And that is the environment and the culture we have, so that yes, results matter, and yes, we're going to hold ourselves and our team members accountable. And you know what? When life is there and you need to be where you need to be,
Yeah.
go do it. And we're a team, and we'll rally and we'll support, because what matters most is health and your family, and being healthy mind, body, spirit. And that, again, that's not lip service. And that comes from Scott and our teams, and we want to make sure that everybody here understands that. I have felt that, I've experienced that. And so just even being able to go and see my kids play when they were in their college careers, I could do that. And now certainly with technology, you can work, remotely, and that certainly helps. But also
In between innings, if they're not playing,
if there was a phone call I had to take at the ballpark, I'd be like, hey, sorry for the noise here in the background. I'm going to refrain from giving my advice to the umpires while we're on the call right now.
But I think, what's interesting there, as people grow in their own development and where they decide to work, there is no necessarily right answer, but the structure of the type of company you work for is going to dictate a lot of that. If you are if your sons had gone into investment banking in Chicago, it's an expectation of 100 hours a week. And I don't really necessarily care what's going on. We've got to get things done. And as long as you go into that knowing that, then what it is, and then finding maybe an organization that says, okay, I want to achieve. It isn't like you guys aren't growing, aren't achieving, but how do I find, that balance, which I think is becoming more and more prevalent. And it's interesting you mentioned the mental coaching, because you said they were working with, athletes. I think one of the faster growing groups, because I see it on LinkedIn all the time, so many great professionals like Jordan Montgomery and Ben Newman, one of the best performance coaches, actually working with executives, working with team. It isn't just for athletes, it's this imposter syndrome, the how do I get it all done, that they'll make their way into corporate America at some point, your boys as well too, I bet.
It is, and having these conversations, and it makes me pause and think, oh my goodness, that resilience, that grit, that consistency over intensity, that applies here 100%. And what does it mean to be resilient in the face of, uncertainty? And the world that all of us are in, from a corporate perspective, from an economic and running the business, there's uncertainty everywhere. And, okay, but what can I control? What is within our control? How do we show up on a daily basis? How do we have discipline in the work that we're doing? And, how do we slow the game down? Even in corporate America, how do we slow the game down so we can make informed decisions, so we can get diverse perspectives? It applies 100%. And so having the EQ, some might call them soft skills, others might say power skills, which I think they are power skills. I think they're necessary. It's that the technical business acumen, but then also having the understanding about how to deal with each other in a human connection. And that mental aspect is so important for that.
EQ, for those of you, just Google that. That's the emotional intelligence, and is a tremendous complement to what we just call, book smarts. That typical, maybe thinking of leadership. But if you can find people that can combine the EQ, which then makes me wonder for you then. So people right now are watching going, okay, well, she's really sweet. She's really easy to listen to, very comfortable. But ultimately, you've got to make tough decisions at times. You've got to drop the hammer at sometimes, Beth. How does that change for you, or what's your leadership style when someone isn't meeting the standard? And how do you have those courageous conversations? Tell us a little bit about that. How do you shift gears there, Beth?
Well, it's never easy. So, I will say, and so again, from a standpoint of having been, in HR and running an HR team, and having the conversations of how do you let somebody go when we are doing, fortunately at EMC, We have not had widespread kind of reductions in force, but they do happen. And so again, when we think about what are the business needs in order to keep EMC going and where we're going to go, yes, and you're right, you do have to make hard decisions. And so this is where that I talked about it a little bit earlier, the both and. In terms of you can hold two competing thoughts and act on them, recognizing, quite honestly, it sucks to have some of these conversations. I mean, it just does. And quite honestly, if people thrive on having some of those conversations, maybe should they be a people leader? Because
if they're looking forward to that day, I get it cut like 3 people today, honey. This is going to be awesome.
I would be a little reluctant and question that. But you can recognize this is hard. And I can deliver this message and have this conversation in a way that demonstrates compassion, that demonstrates empathy, that demonstrates respect for the individual, the human being that's sitting across the table. And that's where, so early on in my career, I was working with another attorney, and she gave me such good advice. And she said, Beth, you always have to be comfortable in your skin. You always have to be comfortable in your skin. And from that standpoint, it was, what are your values? What is important to you? What are the values that you hold dear? What's my leadership brand? Who am I as a leader? How do I show up? And so that even in those hard conversations, how am I showing up? I don't want to show up and be a jerk or indicate that there's a power trip or anything of that nature. So I don't. I want to show up, and I strive to show up as somebody who I care. I have empathy, and this is a situation, and this is a conversation that we need to have. And so with that framework, I'm not going to say it makes it easier, but it allows the conversation to be had in a way where I can be true to my values and I can respect the individual that I'm having the conversation with, no matter how tough it is.
See, and what I love there, man, that was beautiful. You said, I want people to know I have a leadership brand. So when people are coming in there, I would assume they always assume positive intent because you are a positive, very high EQ, but you also have high expectations. You don't get to where you are if you're not performing. So there is a leadership brand in how I show up. And so that those conversations, though they are tough, people, I would assume, leave there and say, okay, well, that was hard to hear, but I knew it came from a position of positive intent versus tearing down versus hierarchy versus trying to do that. So, that was great.
Not always. I mean, because there are times where I've had some of those conversations and then the feedback is, well, Beth, you're a bit of a micromanager. Right? And so then I pause and I'm like, am I? So I need to reflect. And so this is when, and even in those hard conversations, I mean, I need feedback as well. And so here's what, again, kind of going back to the team that Scott has built. It's really good because we give each other feedback. Yeah. And we need that. And we know that comes from a standpoint of making us better leaders. And so, there have been multiple times where, and Scott and I meet virtually every week and have one-on-ones. And Scott will say to me, hey, Beth, whatever, maybe it was a presentation or maybe it was an interaction. And he will say, are you open to some feedback? Which, yes, I'm open to feedback.
But let's do it tomorrow. I'm a little fragile right now. I'm open, but I'll be more open tomorrow.
But I appreciate that. And then the same thing, he will ask. And so it might be an interaction. It might be having a presentation. And he will say, okay, how could I have done that better? So again, he leads by example. And so the same thing for Anne and for Todd and hopefully myself, that the others see that. And again, for our teams that we're leading, it is that how can you have that caring critic who has your back?
And Scott asked it in a lot better way too. If you just ask, especially people that are reporting to you, or maybe just even a level, and say, hey, what do you think of the presentation? You are just going to get fluff, because they don't know what you're truly asking. And they're like, oh, dude, you crushed it. That was a walk-off home run there. And inside you're thinking, God, that was horrible. But the way he described it, what should I have done better? What did I miscommunicate? What did not hit the mark? Now you're saying I am open to, that feedback. So that was important. So here's the last fun fact before we'll let Beth end up. So people who stayed on the entire time period. Did Rush go to Drake, by the way, for law school too, or was he Iowa?
Yes. No,
I thought he was Drake.
Yep, we both went to Simpson. We both went to Drake.
So here's a little known fact. Rush is also our corporate attorney on a lot of things here at McGill Jungie. And so when Ross and I had come together, we had to come up with a name, and we start throwing out names. And he's like, well, you can't use that, and you can't have your name in there. And, what's the LLC? The McGill Jungie's the DBA name. And he said, well, Ed, you went to Drake. Ross went to Simpson. What if you call it Drake Simpson LLC? And that is the actual name, because I'm a Drake Bulldog. Ross and I played against Rush, or I played against Rush and Ross, but our actual corporate LLC, now we have our own individual S corps, but our corporate LLC is Drake Simpson LLC. Now, Ross tried to flip and say, what about Simpson Drake? I know you got to go in alphabetical order. And the time frames we played, we won. So it's going to be Drake Simpson LLC. So your husband is ingrained.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I didn't know if you knew that or not, but he was the one that
I didn't know that. He's a creative guy. He is a creative guy.
He's very creative, very smart, great business attorney in here too. So Beth, is there anything that you wanted to add just in our last 30 seconds here together?
Well, and thank you. This has been insightful for me as well. Thank you for your curiosity and for inviting me on here. I am a student of leadership, and
yes, you are.
I do love learning and listening. And, I think, one of the big takeaways is that we're constantly evolving, and we're constantly learning. And my hope is I don't stop doing that, because there's so much. The more you learn, the more you realize you have left to learn, which is kind of a fun thing. And I think when we have that mindset of that curiosity, so I know you've used that, and I love that, because I do think that curiosity is so critical to effective leadership as well. How do we continue to be curious, open learners? So it's been a lot of fun, and I really, really appreciate your leadership, Ed. So thank you.
Oh, this has been fun. This has been awesome. And make sure that if you found this beneficial, again, that you like, share, subscribe, etc. This is Ed McGill, host of LED Leadership with Ed, signing off. And Beth, been a complete joy and a lot of fun as always. Thanks, everyone, and have a super day.